Welcome, everybody, to the Enlightened Entrepreneur Podcast. And thank you for joining us here to build livelihoods that matter, be your own boss, and make the world an even better place. I'm your host, Julie Sampson, director of the Scheinfeld Center, and let's get to it. 2022 is dubbed the year of the worker, with a Great Recession and Reshuffle in response to the pandemic. Beyond hybrid and remote teams, how can the workplace be redesigned to drive equity and create a more rewarding and engaging workplace for the employees? Employee-owned companies may be a part of the answer. Today, we're kicking off a 5-part series that explores the transformative effects of employee-owned businesses on workers, communities, and local economies, and simultaneously, they boost the business growth, productivity, and profitability. Joining us to break it all down is Rick Plympton. He's CEO of Optimax, which is America's largest precision optics manufacturer for research and industry, including aerospace, defense, consumer electronics, and more. In 2021, Optimax was honored on the RBG Top 100 list of the fastest growing privately owned companies. Rick has provided leadership and vision for the past 25 years to grow Optimax from a small startup to an employee-owned business with over 350 employees. By example, he's going to help us understand how employee ownership can solidify employee prosperity and customer success. Welcome, Rick, and thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I just want to be clear, I'm not an academic, but I'm happy to share our experiences and just talk through some processes.
That's what we're after. That'll be.
Where do you want to start?
Okay, well, before we jump in, it might be good if we give our audience a quick definition of employee ownership for any who are not familiar with it. And we could say that employee ownership is where a company's employees are full or part owners of the business. And there are different types of employee ownership. One type is the employee ownership trust. It also goes by EOT. It's a trust that holds some or all of the shares of a company for the purpose of providing ongoing benefit to employees of the company. And to our audience, if you'd like to take a deeper dive into that, the link in the description below for a video where we went over the definition of all the different types of employee ownership. But Optimax is an example of a company that formed an EOT in 2020. And so, Rick, if you could share a bit about Optimax and your role in the company.
Yeah, so at Optimax, Mike Mandina is my business partner, and he and I we looked for about 5 or 6 years for a succession plan for the company, and we landed on the EOT as a solution for us that met the metrics we were looking for. So we wanted a solution that provided for many decades of prosperity, that ensured that we continue to share profits with our employees. We created a perpetual purpose trust that defines these tenets. The third tenet is that the trustees have the authority and responsibility to make sure that the leadership at Optimax is being benevolent. If anyone's getting greedy or misleading the organization in some way, the trustees actually have the authority to kind of kick that person off the leadership team. So with that framing, where the trustees, while they have nothing to do with the operations of the business, they oversee the board of directors of Optimax. And Optimax operates as a for-profit business wholly owned by the Employee Ownership Trust. And one of the beautiful things about our corporate structure is that going forward, if you look at each profit dollar, we give 25 cents to the employees, roughly 25 cents goes to taxes, and the other 50 cents is used to grow the business. So it's a very robust economic model.
Fantastic. On the employees' end, what is their experience of being in an EOT? Like, what are the top 3 benefits to the employees?
Yeah, so at Optimax, we have a corporate culture of self-management, and we've been doing that for years. And we wanted to make sure as we went into, as we went through a succession plan, that we're able to preserve that culture. And the EOT provides a corporate structure where that can happen. One of the things that's unique or misleading, I guess, about an EOT, the employees don't actually own shares in the company. All the voting shares at Optimax are owned by the Employee Ownership Trust. And as I said, the profits are shared with the employees. So we were able to eliminate any investors or shareholders as we went through the succession plan. And that's the real beauty of the Employee Ownership Trust. And the perpetual purpose that's written kind of defines the wishes of the founders and how the company will go forward.
Then what employees experience with financially, do they get to share in the profits on an ongoing basis? So however Optimax is doing, they get a certain percentage then in their paychecks? Is that how they
it? So good question. So what we do at Optimax, at the end of each month, we close our financial books, and within a few days, we figure out, did we make profit or not? And then we take 25% of the profit and we share it with our employees. For the past several years, we've averaged a little over $1,000 each month as a bonus check for each employee.
Wow, that is amazing. And so they get this financial incentive, but then, this is a different setup than a lot of companies out there, right? If what they're getting back is based on how the company is doing, I would think that it would be an incentive to really be attuned to the company, have a learning type of environment within the company where you can learn.
So I'll try to give you a few examples to illustrate how Optimax is a little different than most companies. So we have a team of about a dozen salespeople at Optimax. In our sales department, nobody gets paid commission. In fact, when I joined the company, there was 10 people at Optimax struggling to make weekly payroll, right? It was a little startup that wasn't really doing that well. And when I joined the company, Mike asked me, you're going to manage sales and marketing for us. So what should your commission be? And I said, whatever's fair for me, let's give it to everybody in the company. So we came up with this bonus plan where everybody gets 25% of we share the profit with everybody. And it's not like managers get a lot more than people on the production floor. Mike and I both grew up blue collar. We want to make sure that we're sharing the wealth with our workers, with everybody in the company, And so it's the way the bonus is paid out. It's not a percentage of your pay. It's a flat bonus all across the company. And the benefit of that is that everyone in the company is motivated to work really well as a team and support each other to create value for our customers each month.
With the voice of employees that we're hearing right now with the Great Resignation and the Great Reshuffling, a lot of that has to do with they want flexibility and greater work-life balance. But a lot of what we hear about too is wanting to know that the company cares about them and their development and, their well-being, beyond just them being a worker at the company, but how is that, affecting their capacity with their families and all of that, right?
And this is so much fun. So at Optimax, we have you probably heard like companies do a peer review or 360 review on their upper management. We have that for everybody in the company every year. And what's really great about it, we distilled it down to like 10 metrics. It's a one pager with 10 metrics. 5 have to do with your attitude or team performance, and 5 have to do with aptitude or skills. And then there's a section for like acknowledgments, like what this person did really well at this year. And then a section for like recommended training, that type of thing. But what's really powerful about it is you fill it out on yourself. You fill out this form, and then maybe a dozen other people that work with or around you, they fill it out, and then your team leader or your coach will sit down with you and compare the two, how you feel you're doing versus how your team feels you're doing. And if there's alignment, that's great. We can just have a conversation about a learning plan. What do you want to learn this year? If there's not alignment, we might have to talk about, why you think you walk on water and the team doesn't, or vice versa. You're doing actually a lot better than you think you're doing, that type of thing. But in terms of a learning plan at Optimax, we provide every employee $5,000 each year for tuition assistance. And we've got about 15% of our company that is actively engaged in college courses or other types of formal training in addition to their job. And we also have a lot of different training programs that we do internally, working with consultants or internal training resources. At Optimax, we have, our HR team does a really great job making sure we have corporate policies and stuff to adhere to state and federal regulations. But we also have a wellness team. And this is a team it's kind of a grassroots effort. Everyone on the team's voluntary. And they have 5 pillars that they look at: career development, personal financial security, emotional, physical, and social well-being of the employees. And so they create programs and bring resources to bear that our employees can leverage to make sure they have a great work-life balance. And that's been really helpful through this pandemic. It's been a stressful time.
Yes, yeah. So do you feel like because of all of this that you had in place that maybe you fared better than a lot of the businesses that had only been considering maybe the bottom line,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, when the pandemic first hit, we were a little worried because in February of 2020, we completed an expansion that doubled the size of our facility. And then the pandemic hit, we're like, oh no, what's going to happen now? But yeah, ironically, we've been very busy through the pandemic. We've hired over 100 people in the last 2 years. And even though we had just doubled the space of our space, we've already run out of space. And so in April, we're breaking ground again to do another expansion and make room for more growth. It's a problem, but it's a happy problem.
Yeah, right, right. And so the way that you have your business set up, with working really as partners with employees, it seems like that enabled you to continue, making the growth and moving forward, even though there was this thing that totally derailed us for a while, and that just says so much to your efforts to ensure that you have an employee centric culture, that really takes that into account as well as the profitability. But did that start from the get-go with Optimax? Did you always have that in mind? Or and once you started the EOT, did that shift it in a different way, more expansive way? Or how did that work? How did that progress? Because we have a lot of startups through our program. And so some of them might be wrapping their heads around, like, how do you even get to the point where you can have a company like yours? Because we hear so much from Gen Z, especially, that they are really concerned about, the experience of workers in the workplace, the impact on the environment, the social good, all of those factors. So can you kind of walk us through, like, how did you progress that?
Well, let me try to answer it this way. What we make at Optimax is precision optics for research and industry. So as an example, we're a key supplier to NASA. We have lenses on each of the Mars rovers that's up there exploring the red planet. So when we make precision components for these programs, many times there's no opportunity to fix it later. It has to be right the first time. And so when we hire somebody and we train them how to make the precision optics the way we make them, we estimate that we put about $50,000 into each new hire within the first 2 years in terms of training. And it's after you've been with us for 5 years, we figure you're part of the core team. And that's, so with our bonus plan, there is what you get is prorated through the first 5 years. At 5 years, you're fully vested on a time frame perspective. And we have over a 90% retention rate for our employees. So it's not like, once we get them in the door, we want to get them trained, get them on the team. And we have a term like they're on the bus. And oftentimes you can see somebody go through this transition where the way we raise children in this country is command and control, whether it's in a school environment or on a sports team. It's about command and control. And a lot of companies are run that way, but we don't operate that way at Optimax. At Optimax, it's about being proactive and self-management. So it takes a little while for many of the new employees to sort of adapt to our culture. Some people adapt to it really quickly, and others it takes a little longer. But within the first few years, people tend to get on board with that. And really it allows each individual to blossom at their own pace. But where I was going to is with our 401k plan, we have that set up so that every individual can be a millionaire by the time they retire if they work with us for their career. And that's one of my personal objectives, and how we set this up is making sure that each employee can be a millionaire and have a comfortable retirement.
That's so amazing. I can only imagine what that environment must be like to work in. Certainly when I was working for different companies, it didn't feel that way. Right. So it seems like you're just really, right. I mean, it started from your roots, the interest in, running a great company, but also taking care of employees. And then it's just blossomed to where you're at this point, and like, you're such a great example of how can a company, really address some of the things that are such a concern for workers. And that kind of leads me to my next question. I mean, with you with Optimax having established this, have you affected other businesses in your community? Have you inspired them? Like, is it, if I was experiencing that in a community, I would think that other businesses would want to stay attuned and learn, and establish their own programs. What have you experienced in that way?
Yeah. So what we did at Optimax was like brand new. We're a manufacturing company. We're the first EOT manufacturing company in the United States. So as on our journey, it's kind of like we're walking through the woods at night in the dark and it's we're just feeling our way. So I'm happy to share what we're doing with others. And of course, I talk with other business leaders here in our community. And we've had one other company, completely different industry, but we've had another manufacturer convert his company to an EOT because he's getting ready to retire and wanted to make sure that his company continued to grow and prosper. When we did the last expansion, I had, town, county, and state officials come in and look at what we were doing. And we gave them a presentation about the growth that we were expecting. And one of the things I shared with them is Optimax in 2021, Optimax is 30 years old. And in the first 30 years, we generated roughly $500 million in revenue. And we shared half of that with our employees through payroll, benefits, and bonuses. So roughly half of each revenue dollar goes to the employees. In the next 30 years, Optimax will generate over $5 billion in revenue. And half of that will be shared with our employees. $2.5 billion will go to our employees. And that's how you ensure that your employees have a good personal financial security. And that's how you grow a community, through little companies that are sharing the wealth with their employees.
Yes. I think, could you touch on the experience within your local community too, in the optics arena? I think that I've heard you mentioned that other companies come in and buy out a company as a succession plan, that it can be bad for a community, so can you talk a bit about that dynamic?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this was one of our other concerns actually when we were looking at succession planning. Here in the Rochester community, this is the home of Kodak and Bausch and Lomb and Xerox, and all of these companies have fantastic technology. None of them are as big and as bold as they were at one time, but here in the Rochester community, we have a lot of engineers, a lot of researchers, and some really fantastic technology for a city our size. I mean, Rochester is only about 200,000 people. But what's come out of the downsizing of the bigger companies is a lot of little companies like Optimax are finding pieces of technology that they can leverage in the global marketplace. And whether it's, designing better battery technology or software technology or optics, medical technology, there's all kinds of stuff being developed here in this region. So there's a lot of little companies that are prospering in our region, and it's beautiful to see. One of the problems we had 25 years ago, if you go back to like the mid 90s, early 2000s, we didn't have enough young entrepreneurs in our community, and we had to start teaching entrepreneurship to teenagers so that, we had 20 somethings that were mentally prepared to take on the challenges. And it's starting to happen now.
That's so great. Yeah. So it seems like a really positive community impact. When you have a business who's taking strides like Optimax is, I think it helps to lift, other entrepreneurs, other businesses to kind of see what's possible,
Mhm.
and I think that there are only about 30 or so EOTs in the US. While it's really popular in the UK, it's relatively new, not a new concept, but new to the US. So
Yeah.
I think that the work that you do to kind of share and Optimax does to kind of share your experience of that within your community, and then also across nationwide through podcasts like this, I think it's really important because it can be really inspirational and be some of the change that we need to see in the workplaces. Let's see if we have any questions that I can bring in. Okay, so with a small business owner who hasn't grown to the level that it sounds like you were when you started your EOT, the question is, can this be started at an earlier point with that? Because some businesses don't even see themselves or aspire to be, as big as Optimax is. So when I guess the question, it sounds like it's, can it be started earlier? And does it have to be a company as big as Optimax in order to be effective?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I was doing the research and trying to figure out our succession plan, I looked at ESOPs really hard because I thought that was going to work for us. When I was a younger employee engineer in the company, I just wanted to own one share of stock. It was like an emotional thing. Just I wanted to own a piece of the company. But as I looked at ESOPs, there were a couple issues. One is with an ESOP, you're giving an employee a piece of paper, a share of stock with a promise for cash later. For some companies, that works out great. For some companies, not so well because of the repurchase obligation in future years. But the other thing with ESOP is you have ERISA oversight, and so there's expenses on the order of $100,000 built into standing up your company as an ESOP. With an EOT, it's a different book of law, and it's much simpler. It actually, I liked it because it gives us a lot more flexibility, and there is no ERISA oversight, and so the annual fees are only on the order of $10,000 a year. Might be 10, might be 20, but depending on what you're doing. But it's much less expensive. So yeah, you can have a smaller company, and it may make sense to do an EOT, particularly if your primary interest is sharing the wealth with your employees as you go, as opposed to banking the profits and promising to pay them out later.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that. And then have you noticed in your community, kind of in order to get the EOT going, you needed to have some experts in your corner, right? With an attorney who is familiar with trust, with financial, the financial arm, to handle that. So how did you go about identifying who would be the best best people to bring on with that? Because there's so few of them, it seems like not everybody has that expertise.
Yeah, I was very lucky. It was a few years back. I was speaking at the National Conference for Employee Ownership, and it's essentially an ESOP conference. Almost everybody there is talking about ESOPs. But I was there because I was talking about our unique corporate culture and how we really try to take care of our employees. And at that time, this was, I think, 2018. And at that time, I was looking at creating a nonprofit parent company that would wholly own Optimax. And after my presentation, Um, I met a gentleman named Chris Michael out of New York City, young attorney, and he told me about this thing called an ESOP. And as he started talking about, it, I was like, "You want to go to dinner?" We went out, we talked, and it was like the more he told me about it, the more I was like, "Yeah, this hits on all the metrics. You know, this really, I think, will do what we want to do." And so it's yeah, there's not a lot of expertise. So as we went forward, I continue to keep in touch with Chris, but we found a local attorney here in Rochester that I think he's a really good older attorney, but he's half professor, half attorney, and he got really excited about developing the foundational documents that we needed to stand up our EOT.
Yes, that sounds great. So it sounds like part of the plan for a community who really wants to support this type of employee-owned movement, that developing the local talent, that is familiar with doing this type of work on the financial end, and also, with attorneys. It sounds like that would be a really good step to take for a community, who's wanting to establish
Yeah,
something.
yeah, and more there are resources that are being developed or coordinated. The Chris Michael has a post at the Rutgers University for the Beister Institute, and they have a conference, one or two conferences each year about EOTs. The National Conference on Employee Ownership this year will have a session that's all about EOTs. It's the first time that they've had a session, dedicated to EOTs, and so there's more and more happening each year, and resources are being developed within select universities.
Excellent. I can put some resources down below in the video description, but we're just about at the end of our time. So if for the businesses out there that are thinking that they would like to establish this type of thing, or with entrepreneurs who are just starting out and are thinking, this is the type of culture, that Optimax created right from the get-go, I would like to do that. Do you have any words of wisdom to share with them to inspire them to their next step?
Yeah. In terms of culture, there's a book called Reinventing Organizations by Frederick Laloux. Last name is Laloux. That's really good. It's all about self-led organizations. Gives a lot of helpful examples and guidance on how you might do that in your own organization. And with respect to, learning more about EOT specifically and those corporate structures, I would really encourage people to check out what the information is available for the research that's been done at the Rutgers Institute.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, Rick, thank you so much. We're super excited here in Santa Barbara County that we have a business who is forming an EOT, and it's connecting with other people like you who have already been through the process, that makes it so helpful, for other businesses to move ahead and to kind of form a network of businesses who are working to create these types of opportunities. So thank you for that. And I'm sure that if people will want to get in touch with you and kind of follow Optimax, I put the link to your LinkedIn profile in the video description.
LinkedIn really is the best way. And if we get a dialogue going and we need to take it to email or some other format, we can do that. Yeah, I just want to comment that I see what we're doing as an evolution in capitalism, where the wealth is shared with the workers, with the middle class. And we don't have to get every company to do it. It's not right for every company, but it is a really great way for many companies to transition.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you, Rick. And to our audience, we hope that this inspires you to think about new ways of creating a great workplace for your employees and a great culture, and also to establish a successful business at the same time. This is the first of a 5-part series that will be exploring employee ownership. So please tune in next week where we'll bring you part 2. And in the meantime, take good care, everyone. Thanks again, Rick. And we'll see you next week.